everybody, I'm Jordan at PDQ.com.
And I'm Josh.
And today we got the special guest, Austin, and he's going to walk us through how you can image machines remotely, which sounds...
It's absolutely nice to be here.
Yeah, sounds like magic.
It's so cool to me to image a machine not on the same network.
It's, right now he's making wild claims. Let's see if he can back it up.
Let's see if he can do it, shall we?
Right. Awesome. Well, let's see if I can handle the pressure here. So again, my name is Austin. I'm on the SmartDeploy side, PDQ here. So today, like I said, we'll be focusing on the image deployment side of our remote features here. But what I'll first do is kind of just go over SmartDeploy a little bit in a general sense, just for anybody who's not familiar with the solution or is kind of seeing it for the first time. And then we'll go into some more of the specifics. And hopefully we can really touch on those points we're talking about. So if you're looking at my screen here, this is SmartDeploy. So this is the console. This is what you would install into your environment, because it is an on-prem solution. So it's something that you install onto a server, utility server, something like that. The hardware requirements are pretty small, pretty minimal. I wouldn't really worry about it too terribly much. We do need a virtualization platform and some significant storage space. Those are really the only two things that you really need to consider when you're deciding where to put it. You can see on my machine, I'm RDP'd back to a server in my environment, so the whole team could theoretically access the same server, and that's what I would recommend there. So with that said, the console is doing really two things. Top of funnel here, it is creating all the different deployment components, and it is allowing you to manage those remote machines. And it is the latter that we're really going to be focusing on more here today. So once those kind of things are all built out, imaging, application deployment, and remote driver deployment are, again, kind of the top three actions that you're going to be able to take. I'll be showing here. So with that said, we'll go over to computer management here on the left and hit all computers. You'll notice that there are two different connection types. If you're looking at this column right here, and then it's dependent on how the client is connected back. So there's a client that gets installed onto a target machine. It is a client-driven connection, so the client is looking for a console. It is able to automatically toggle back and forth between the two. So if you have, say, a user who's going in and out of the office, it'll automatically do local if they're on site, or automatically do cloud if they're remote. If the person installs a client while they're out, like at home, it'll automatically do cloud the first time. So it's completely independent of where they are, has the ability to do both equally well. So if it's on a local network, it just uses the host name value, pretty basic. If it is on a remote network, though, it has a cloud-based component. We call it Cloud Broker, is the friendly name we've given this Azure component, and it allows for those remote connections back and forth. So those remote connections, again, it's just, yeah.
Is it possible to zoom in on that? I guess it's showing up pretty tiny on the screen for people.
I cannot. Let's see.
Yeah, I think
I'm not sure if there's a way.
On our side, I think that's about as zoomed in as we can get on it too.
Yeah, I might be able to try to mess with the DPI in my monitor here, but it is RDP'd, so sometimes it gets a little wild. I'm not sure if you can zoom in within Zoom or not, but I don't think I can change that within the console itself. Hopefully you can read it though. It's a lot of little text there. So with that said, again, kind of our solution is just bridging this connection. That's what the Cloud Broker piece does. It allows you to see these remote machines. And then from there, you also would have a cloud storage provider of your choice. So this would be your storage, your account, sign in, saves a refresh token, and it uses that for the file delivery. So it's kind of a marriage of the two pieces together. You have this connection that we're providing and the storage those are providing. And again, it allows us to do these operations fully remotely here. So with that said, once you have all that done, you'll have this kind of built out infrastructure that allows you to run a variety of different deployments. So if I click on a machine like this one here, you can see that this kind of ribbon appears. And again, these top three, which is what I was mentioning before, are really the big three that we're able to do from a remote machine. So in broad strokes, before we kind of dive into this in more detail, remote imaging, again, wipes the machine, applies a new image to it, remote application deployment, and remote driver. So if you open one of these up, you can see that you can choose between local or cloud depending on where the person is. And if they are local, then you have the option. And you can choose one of these and fire that right off. So again, that would reimage the machine. We'll go through this in a full walkthrough in a second here, as well as the applications and drivers having a very similar UI. So if you wanted to push a particular app or a particular script, you can do that through this console. So again, there's application packs you can make, and it fires it off. So again, this person is completely remote. It'll download the pack to their machine, whether they're at home or in a different city, wherever they are, and allow you to install that pretty much anywhere, which is one of the hallmarks of this as well. Last little piece of this overview would be the drivers. Now we'll go into this more in detail in a second as well, but the drivers are compiled by our team for each make and model and also allow you to manage these things completely remotely. So if someone's working from home and their machine's out of date, you can fire this off. And again, we curate those so they're all ready to go. And of course, you can also allow users to defer any of these different things up to an hour or schedule it per se the middle of the night, depending on their connection speed or what their needs might be. You can then click on one of these actual machines here. You can pull this open and it provides a little more information about that machine. Now I'm in a fully virtualized environment, and so you can see that that reflects that fact, but of course it would show you what the actual specs would be. And then you would also see any applications that have been installed on the machine. So if you want to track licensing, et cetera, you could see where that is. And then you could, depending on what it is, right click and uninstall. Now, of course, we don't allow you to uninstall SmartDeploy itself through this, but normally there would be an uninstall link. You can fire that off and it would remove it. The last little piece of this screen would be the message history. So if you're doing constant deployment, you're trying to figure out what you did, that would be a way to look back and see what any machines had previously done. If I go over here to this software management tab, I consider this to be kind of the inverse of that. So this is all the apps that have been installed across your entire environment. So what that means is if any client sees an app, it'll populate in this list. You can see, for instance, that I have Notepad++ on 2 machines out in my environment. So you could right click and remove this, or same with Firefox. Now, obviously for this freeware, it's not a big deal, but kind of going back to what I was saying before, if you had, say, Adobe Acrobat Pro, or you had something like that that takes a license, you may want to know how many instances of that, or if there's a software that is not allowed by your organization, then you can make sure that it's removed across the board as well. So right click on a machine. In this case, you can see all the machines it's actually connected to, so you can see those machines. And you can also right click and remove them from everywhere as well. So again, just a way to manage those apps. The next little piece here would be the patch management piece. So patch management, similar but not the same as, say, like a WSUS solution. It's not granular in that sense. What this is doing is it's hooking into the Windows Update feature of a given machine, whether it's local or cloud, and allowing you to essentially tell it to run every update that's available. So if you have somebody working from home, again, they're not on the network, they're not getting regular updates from internal, and you can say, hey, just run every update that you can here, and it'll fire those off. So that's kind of the idea. Again, if you have something like WSUS in place, they would kind of work in concert. That solution would curate which apps or updates are available, and this would tell them all to run. So it would be a standalone kind of piece there. So that is your quick overview of kind of all of this in general. There's 2 pieces of this that I'm going to go into more detail about and provide a little bit of a walkthrough here. So I'm kind of drilling down a little further. The first one will be the driver update. So if we go back here, recall there is an option to update drivers. Now, once again, these are all virtual machines. So if I click one of these, there's only going to be, really the option to do that. Obviously, you could put those drivers on there, but that's your option, right? So to take a look at that, you go to Platform Packs. I'm gonna move my little screen here. These are all the platform packs I've downloaded. Now, we have about 1,600 of these packs already made. They are make, model, and OS specific. They are made by hand by our team here. So they're cleaned up and ready to go, guaranteed to work. All you need to do is first for the model that you want, and then download it right here. So again, we have logic that I'll show you in a second on how to automatically apply this to that pack. So the idea being that you say 5 or 10 or 20 packs downloaded, you go to deploy, and it will automatically use it. So you don't have to think about it, you just download them all. SmartDeploy will handle the rest. If you right click on one of these and say upload or edit here, and you can see what one of these actually looks like. So again, these are not something that most customers really want to play with or need to. The idea is that it is fully handled. You can just download it and walk away. That's really the cool part about it. But if you are someone who likes to take a look, you can open it up and see that it's done by make, model, and OS like this. You can also take a look and see the update cadence. You may notice that ours is not fully up to date here. I actually could update this to an even later version, but this really does just tell you what the cadence is. You can see that it's roughly once a month, sometimes more often than that, sometimes less. but it's roughly once a month, mostly based on the updates from the manufacturer. If they didn't update anything, there's no new drivers to add. You can also see the platform pack, the query that it runs there, which allows you to, again, have the machine automatically installed. So during a deployment, it would query your location, cross-reference it first on that, and then it would automatically apply it. So again, just download it and away you go. The last piece that I'll go through, and this is kind of more towards the actual.
If you modify something and then you download next month, does it overwrite what you modified, or does it just make a duplicate? Or do you have to go through make the modification for every new update?
Yeah, so these are kind of, you can see this little path on the top here. It's just a file on disk. So if you update it, it will overwrite the existing file. So if you want a manually modified custom one, maybe you don't want the hotkeys or you don't want the dock driver for some odd reason, and you delete those and then you update it, it'll put them back. So if you want a custom pack, you just make a copy of it, rename it something like, Austin's custom version, or whatever the situation is. My go-to example is like a traveling salesperson. They have like a LTE card, like an expansion card, or 5G or something like that. That's not a normal thing in the machine. You add that driver, you might want a special one like that, allowing you to manually have a second one. So again, good question.
We actually have another couple of questions that we'll throw at you at this point. So first question is, can you remotely join a domain? Daniel C.
I would say yes, asterisk. So there is not a way to do a remote domain join in a one step. SmartDeploy does have a feature we'll talk about in a second where it will automatically domain join. We use SysPrep to do it, and SysPrep doesn't have the ability to have a software VPN running. And so unless you're in the office, it's not going to be able to automatically do it. So for 99% of people, the process is going to be deploy on a work group, connect to the VPN, and then you could domain join. SmartDeploy does have a piece of this, and you'll see here. So you can see there is a domain join component. You can put in the FQD in your domain and your OU and those types of things. But this is passing all that information to the endpoint. And then the endpoint is then trying to actually run this kind of verbatim, just like if you walked over to any machine and typed it in yourself. So that machine has to be able to communicate with your domain controller somehow for that to actually work. So again, generally speaking, it's a VPN thing.
Cool. And we have one other quick question for you. Any chance these driver packages can be added to PDQ? Eric R.
Drivers are drivers. They are just the files right from the manufacturer. However, and this is, I wouldn't consider myself a DNI PDQ expert yet. So this is talking out of turn here a little bit, but I think only SmartDeploy has the logic to actually automatically run them. It's a proprietary file type here. So I'm not aware of a way to export and use these anywhere else. You could literally export the drivers out of here and then use them. But if you're asking if you can just deploy a platform pack with PDQ, I believe the answer is no.
Cool. All right. We'll save the rest for after.
Perfect. All right. So the last little piece here is probably more core to the topic of the day here, which is that remote imaging. So all this is kind of surrounding the topic, ancillary topics, and how you can use different pieces and different components to do different things. Now, if you want to actually remotely image a machine, I'm going to walk through a couple of different ways to do that through the console here. So before we can click this button and actually image a machine, we'll need to set up our environment. And I'll kind of talk about some of those things you'll need to do. So if you hit activities, Reimage devices now. These are the 5 different things you're going to need to do in order to actually deploy really anything with SmartDeploy. We're not going to go through all of them here today, but in broad strokes, you'll need to build out a VM. We always use VMs for the reference machine. So you'll need a VM. SmartDeploy will then capture that into an image. And we don't really have time to go through all those in a little intricate detail, but just know that you will need an image from a VM along with the platform packs that we've talked about. So it's hardware independent image, hardware specific platform packs. And for today's demo, I'm going to assume that you have this. This is something you maybe have done, or you have a production local environment and you're just kind of adding on cloud is where we're at today. So we'll assume you have an image. We'll assume we have the drivers, and we're going to go to this create answer file page right here. Now, a lot of solutions have answer files. It's not necessarily a novel concept, but ours allows you to specify exactly how a deployment is going to run. So we'll walk through this here. So now the first thing you're going to want to do is choose where the image is located. If it's a local network, it would be a map drive. But of course, we're on the cloud here today, so we'll choose the cloud option. You'll authenticate with a cloud provider. Now, I've already signed into OneDrive, so you'll do that. It'll save a refresh token. Like, once again, this is going to be your account using your storage, so just be aware. Choose an image. Now, I have this ancient 1909 image that's nice and small, which is why I keep it there. So you select that, and it's going to save a portion of that file. There's a little checksum, just make sure it's all healthy before you're committed to it. And then you have the ability to add the platform packages and the application packager too. So the idea in SmartDeploy, generally speaking, is you can either have an image with nothing in it, an image with everything in it, or an image with some things in it. And that is what we recommend here, is make a lowest common denominator image across a broad team that you can then use with apps and drivers. So what does that mean? Well, imagine you have a sales team and maybe you have an engineering team. Maybe they both need Office, they both need Windows, both need all the similar things, but the engineers maybe need Visual Studio Code, they need Eclipse, whatever they need these different things. But the salespeople, of course, don't need those. Rather than making two separate images, you make one that's lowest common denominator, gives everybody Office, gives everybody 7-Zip and Adobe Reader, and then you can discreetly pick what you want to do. And that's what we're seeing here, is the ability to add these apps as part of a deployment. So pick the apps you want. Choose a naming convention that you want to do. There's 3 here. It tries these in order. So if it's an in-place upgrade, it'll keep your name like Austin PC. It'll just keep my name. You can read from the WMI values on the hardware. You can modify this to be SM BIOS, asset tag, or any of the millions of other ones you have in there. Or you can generate a custom name. These pound signs are going to be random numbers. So generally speaking, it's kind of either a option of last resort, or if you have a general naming scheme, you don't care too much about it. But again, it'll fail over, say it's a bare metal machine and no values, it'll fail over like that. Once again, if you're doing an in-place upgrade, we have a USMT integration. This is the USMT from the Windows 10 ADK, so just full disclosure there, that's what it is. It does a great job of migrating the user profiles, the app data, and the My Docs, so my pictures, etc. In this particular case, what you want to do is save them locally on the disk, protects the disk, deletes the files around it, and allows that scan state and load state process to work. We strongly recommend you use a Mac key, product key for this. You don't have to, but that's our recommendation. It allows you to automatically have Windows activated as part of a deployment so you can stay compliant. Here's that domain join feature I talked about a minute ago. This is what it would normally look like. So if you are on a local network or have some kind of fancy hardware VPN tunnel that exists at your site, you can use this top option. But again, for most cloud implementations, you'll leave it on a work group, and then you can join a VPN and domain join after the fact. Time zone, I am in Seattle here, so that would be my time zone. There is the SmartDeploy client, which again powers all this remote management features that we talked about, so you'll want to have that automatically installed. You give it a description if you'd like. Again, if you're sales versus engineer versus marketing, you might want to put a little description and say, hey, this is the intended use case, but it's just for your own notes. Quick summary, and that will be it. That little XML gets saved, and then you have a deployment scenario kind of pre-baked. Generally speaking, as I mentioned, you'll end up with several of these different things for your deployment scenario. So
in the case of the answer file, since it's using packs from the product, that's going to keep up to date as you download it from it. But how often do you have to update the base image itself? I guess that I don't know if it's still called the gold image or not, but
yeah, that's the phrase we use a lot too. It's something of a moving target. It depends on your business, depends on your organization. I mean, there's some people who are updating these things, almost weekly because it just needs to be absolutely bleeding edge. I've seen that. I've seen once a quarter. You see sometimes people use LTSC and they don't do it as often. The short answer is, there's no time frame that we're going to force you into. But I will say this: in order to do what you'll do is you'll boot up the VM, repatch it, save it, and you can recapture it based on whatever cadence you need to. Generally speaking, again, if it's a major update, probably what I would do if it was me would be every time Windows releases a new, major build, probably make a new VM around that. Again, it's completely up to you. What you'll need to do is recapture the image and then remake a new answer file and media as well, since it's all kind of baked in. As for the platform packs, though, since that's pointing just to a folder rather than anything else, you do not need to update pretty much anything. As long as you have everything working the way you want, you can just download additional driver packs and then it'll just find them and use them. So that makes it really nice. But really, I guess the short answer is it's up to you in terms of how often you want to update things, how often you want to modify things. So the Media Wizard, this is the last piece. This is where you're going to kind of configure, hey, how do I want to actually run this? And one of the cool pieces of SmartDeploy that I really like, the drivers are one really cool feature, the cloud's another, and this is another piece that I like a lot. SmartDeploy has this concept of images, platform packs, application packs, all kind of sitting in a repository, just these components, like a pool of components. And then you can use them in a variety of ways. So you could say, hey, I already have an answer file, an image, and drivers I want to use. And you could make several different media types all based around that. So let's say you want a USB, plug it in, streams it from your file server. Great. You could then make an offline one that takes the same files and configures it onto there. Or you could, again, deploy the same image and everything else via WDS. So it's just taking the same exact files and allowing you to deploy in multiple ways, which is kind of one of the hallmarks here. The feature that I'm going to key off of, though, today is this deployment package one. So this is what's going to populate my dropdown when I go to deploy over here. So I hit deployment package, I'll hit next. The platform packs have their NIC driver and storage drivers kind of ripped out and included into here. If you've ever tried to do a deployment and you've seen like a missing hard drive or the NIC is saying not initialized or something like that, that's what solves that. It gives that PE environment the drivers it needs. Choose either one answer file or several. If you choose one, it'll just automatically start. If you choose a couple, it'll pop up and it'll ask you, okay, is this a salesperson, is this a marketing person, is this whatever you've created, it'll pop up and you can just simply select. So if you have these different deployment scenarios you're doing on a regular basis, you can use a single media and choose which one you want. You give it a password if you want to add a layer of security there, so not just anybody can do anything. 64-bit is what pretty much everybody's using today, and then give it a name. So I could call it, remote, I'll spell it right here, remote deploy. We'll live with that for now, or something along those lines. So maybe you give it OneDrive or some information about what this usually is. Again, in production, I would probably key off of the version of Windows, where it's being saved, and those types of things. So you have a nice idea at a glance. So that's really it. So again, we've made some assumptions here today that we already have some components built, but that is what you'll need to do and to actually kind of build this whole thing out. So then if I go over to computer management, hit all computers, I can then choose this cloud machine, say image, choose cloud, and then hit a package. Of course, we didn't actually build that one, but this is what one looks like. It populates this dropdown so you can have your different deployment scenarios kind of pre-baked into here. And as with the other features, you can allow people to defer or schedule a deployment for a later time. Say somebody has a slower connection, you can do it overnight or something like that. So what we'll do here for my last little piece of this kind of overview is kind of walk through a thought experiment about how we might use this. So imagine you have somebody receive a laptop at their home, just kind of ice cold, right? It's either from CDW or from Best Buy, or they found it or whatever, just completely just random laptop. So how do we get that thing to be actually deployed with SmartDeploy? Well, the first thing they need to do is install the client. Generally, provide it to them via OneDrive download link or something like that. It's about 100 megabyte MSI files. All it is, really basic. Double click on it, boom, like we talked about before, pops up in here. So that's the first piece. Got the client installed. Second piece is to start the deployment through here, as I talked about. So again, that's what it looks like. Click next and finish. And so from here, I'm going to kind of give you a tour under the hood a little bit on how this actually is going to work, and then I'll start a deployment as well, so we can take a look at that run and answer any questions. So this is probably really the core of the whole thing, is how does this actually work? Well, I'll give you the full tour. So if you click on deploy, it's going to create a message, and it's going to go up to Azure and back down to the endpoint. That's that cloud broker piece. That's what we're doing automatically for you. That includes the instruction set for the type of a deployment we're going to run, as well as a refresh token of your cloud storage. So in my case, OneDrive. That remote machine uses the refresh token to download a roughly 800 megabyte PE environment. Again, that's what that Media Wizard built for us. You then download that. Again, it's automatic. Does a BCD edit, creates a RAM drive, and then boom, the machine reboots. As an aside, we always use the same PE environment, so you have the same features available to you if you were to walk over to it and use a USB as if you did this. Same exact thing. machine then again reboots and launches into our actual deployment environment. Now, for today's demo, just given the amount of time we have, I've set up a separate machine here that is running off an ISO. So full disclosure, it's an ISO, not the actual cloud. The cloud has a 5-minute syncer on each side. So it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to start. So rather than, watch the clock spin, we'll just fire this up. But this will look exactly the same. And so from here, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and kind of narrate this process as it goes through. And again, that'd be a perfect time for any questions as they come up. But the last little thing I'll say is what to expect. So you'll see SmartDeploy boot up, downloads the image in roughly 1 gig chunks, downloads the platform packs, wipes the drive, reboots, runs sysprep. Sysprep is where we do the name, the region, the product key, all those fun things. Runs through out-of-box experience. Control delete screen comes up. We install the client, and then the client is also where we communicate back, but also that's what runs the application packs as well. So that is your kind of your full tour end to end of how that would work through here. So again, I'll kind of pause right there and let this go. And we can let this run in the background while any questions come up.
Yeah, we do have a bunch of questions, actually.
Awesome.
All right. First question. What cloud services are supported? Only the 4 shown? Gene C.
That is correct. We only support those 4. So Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive for Business, and Box are the 4 we support. Things like S3 or Azure Storage is on our radar. But there's just no API for it yet. So it's more to come.
Okay, next question. Are you able to use the PDQ deploy packages in SmartDeploy's application section? Is it planned for future? Zergfest.
That is an outstanding question. I think that's a question that a lot of people, including people in this right here, like myself, have asked. I think the answer to that question, is kind of 2 parts. First, right now, they are distinct solutions. We are one big happy family, but the code base is still separate. So there's SmartDeploy, there's PDQ, and they live side by side. I think, the natural evolution of the 2 products will bring them closer together. But that's another one of those things where it remains to be seen exactly how the integration works. But I would personally be surprised if they stayed isolated forever.
Okay, and we have a question from Chad B. Chad would like to know, can the driver packs replace the need for Dell command update?
I'm not super familiar with the Dell version. I know there's a Lenovo version of that. Each of the programs has their own in-place little updater utility. Generally speaking, I would say the answer is yes. Our drivers are all the drivers. So I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when the packs are updated, we pretty much go and look for all the new drivers, include all of them in there. So every time you push a new pack, it's pushing all of the drivers. So I would say yes. If you're using another utility to manage drivers on a machine, then yes, SmartDeploy can fully replace that. I'm not sure if those utilities have other functions on there. Another thing is we didn't mention is SmartDeploy also does the BIOS flash. So in general, I would say the answer is yes, but without knowing the tool super well, I wouldn't be able to say if it replaces all of its functionality.
I would think if you're specifically trying to update a single component, then the command line for Dell still has a lot of value because the driver packs some of those were near a gig. So if it's a quick one-off, I think it's there. But if you're just looking to update all drivers, then absolutely, I say it does.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. If you're trying to use a scalpel and just say, hey, I just want to upgrade the Bluetooth driver, then for sure.
Okay, next question. What advantages does SmartDeploy have over SCCM? Jorlando D.
So SCCM, is this enormous solution. Usually when I talk about SCCM versus SmartDeploy, I usually say that SCCM is more everything. It's bigger, it costs more, has more features, more complexity, more training. It's more by every metric. And a lot of times it's too much training, too much cost, too much anything else. And so people are looking for something that's a lot more streamlined. So, I would usually say that if imaging is part of your day, it's part of your job, it's what you do from 2 to 3, you're not an imaging person, then something like SmartDeploy is going to be a better fit just because you can jump in and use it in an afternoon. I think literally from start to finish, if you installed it at noon, you could be deploying machines by the end of the day versus SCCM. You probably would have to get close to certified before you could hope to really do anything with it. So that's usually what I tell people. Nothing against SCCM as a solution. It's wonderful. It's just a beast.
It is.
And for most people, it's just not necessary.
And our next question, is there any provision to pull the license from BIOS, aka Dell Systems? Sincerely, Gene, the dancing machine.
This is a great question, and this comes up on my calls several times a week, every week, and it has for years. There's two sides to this question, and it's a little bit of a rodeo here. Side A is the technical side. The way SmartDeploy works is we take either the product key either in the image capture, not the VM, but in the capture or in the answer files I mentioned before. That gets passed to the unattended XML that SysPrep uses, and it will just activate if you give it to us. If you do not do that, you leave it blank, then SmartDeploy takes no action with regard to licensing. So functionally, yes, a lot of times a machine will boot into Windows. Windows will hunt around for a key and it'll find one in the BIOS and it'll just activate. Not every time, but often. And so that's not really a SmartDeploy related thing. That's just Windows being Windows. Now, the part of that gets a little weird is that the OEM keys in the BIOS don't have what's called reimaging rights, which means they're not actually compliant to use with any imaging software, like any of them, not just SmartDeploy. And so it will sometimes activate, but then be out of compliance, but you won't know that because it says it activated. So our recommendation is always to use a MAC key from volume licensing to stay fully compliant with Microsoft. But that's kind of the way that the cards fall is, we recommend it, don't require it. And to answer your question more succinctly, a lot of times it will just activate. It'll just go. So it won't be compliant, but it will activate.
All right. Next question up. Similar to Jorlando, leveraging Fog project with PDQ integration, is SmartDeploy Windows specific, or can it do remote systems of OS types? Travis W.
Yeah, great question. We are a Windows only shop here. We're kind of married to a lot of Microsoft, Windows utilities, things like SysPrep. We use the DISM command. We're using the Windows 10 80K, and we're really kind of connected up to Windows and to Microsoft. So the short answer is that we don't do Mac, we don't do Linux. We do pretty much every flavor of Windows that ever existed.
All right, we still have a few questions in the queue. You hanging in there, Austin?
Yeah, the more the better. I love the question.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, just here to drink while he works.
I know, you guys are just drinking, having a good time. Let Austin do the heavy lifting here. How does it handle large networks with multiple VLANs? Steve?
So there's more to that. So basically the way SmartDeploy works is I'll answer this question by doing a slight sidestep to it. If you look at this page or on here, you can see that it's using this UNC path. That's basically what SmartDeploy does. SmartDeploy for the client just uses the hosting value over port 8080. And so it looks for a console using that hosting value. And then for deployment, it uses that UNC path using an admin share, using very similar to the net use command. It's just literally seeing if it can map a drive. Very similar to go to this PC in Windows and trying to map a drive. Very, very similar. So the reason I'm saying that and not answering your question is because it depends on how your network is set up. And I'm not really a network engineer, but what I can say is we use the regular Windows, networking protocols, process, the whole shebang. So if your environment has VLANs, but it's set up so that the traffic can route and there's DNS resolution across them and everything's happy, then great, no problem at all. If it's not the case, then the reverse is also true. If you can't find something by host name or you can't map a drive, then it's going to definitely throw a wrench in there. So it's one of those things where, in SmartDeploy, we really provide you two options. Either you give us the credentials and you give us a path and we try to connect. And so if your network is set up to do it, it'll do it. If it won't, it won't. For most people, I would say VLANs are fine, unless it's specifically restricted. I've seen people try to deploy on a guest network that's been isolated, and of course, that won't work. But generally speaking, it should be just fine.
All right, let's keep rolling. Say you have multiple remote offices with a local server. Is it possible to image workstations in those offices centrally from SmartDeploy without installing it on each of those servers? Sincerely, A.
Yeah, so So if I read the question correctly, with these, the person is talking about is like a branch cache adjacent type feature where you say, hey, I want to have a local repository that just sort of automatically pulls. That is not something that we have yet. Something I hope we can work towards. I've spoken with our director of engineering, and he is wanting to have multiple consoles function in that capacity, which is say, hey, tell console B to go do this thing. And I think that's probably where the product is going long term. As of today, we're not quite there yet. So if you have multiple sites, you can either install multiple consoles on it. There's no licensing considerations for that. So you can just install it wherever you'd like. And then you can RDP to it. So for instance, you have 3 major campuses, you have 3 consoles, 3 repositories. You can treat it like that, or you can just use the cloud. Of course, if you were happy with, say, using like a USB stick or something like that, you could, of course, have your physical media pointing to those other repositories. So when you physically drive over there, it'll pull from that server. But it doesn't have the logic to automatically pick the closest hop, if that's kind of what you're drilling towards.
Okay, we're going to move into what we call the speed round. Austin, this is going to make you work. We try and get these,
Sure.
We try to answer these in 60 seconds or less, if possible. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Here we go. Can this work remotely over VPN? Long story short, if I have a remote user who is having issues, what do I provide to them to get this puppy strutting? What firewall ports need to be opened? Jorlando D.
Yeah, so VPN would allow you to do, you can do an image, so you can do an application push, or you could do a driver push via VPN because it's sitting in Windows. Again, that software VPN is going to prevent the imaging from working because once it reboots, it'll lose a connection, the whole thing will blow up. But you could do app and you could do driver. I would recommend just using cloud though. You're not really getting any extra value by using local. Ports, we use port 443 to HTTPS to Azure and to your cloud storage, so that open. We use port 8080 internally for version 3 of SmartDeploy. So not a ton of ports. There's an article on our website about that. But generally speaking, yeah, 8080, 443. Make sure you're open to Azure and open to cloud. I wouldn't really use VPN personally. You can. But again, I think the only time I'd really use that is if you need a domain join.
Yeah, and Austin, those are outbound connections from the client on 443. So that customer or their user at their house doesn't actually have to do anything, right? Any person at their house is going to just have HTTPS open anyway. This is more Just
of sometimes we have government or like security contracts, and those people, have everything locked down, so you need to specifically open it up.
All right, looks like we have 4 more questions in the queue. Let's do this thing. Do I rely on the agent to image the target computer remotely, or is it agentless? Thomas M.
Yeah, so SmartDeploy does have an agent. You will need the agent for anything, air quotes, remote. You can still use USBs and those types of things for the bare metal walk over to it scenario, and I still recommend that. But anything remote does have an agent. It's installed as a service using a local system account, and that is required for any of that cloud, remote office, remote home user scenario.
Excellent. Next question. My BIOSes, or would it be BIOSi? I don't know. We'll call it BIOSes. Are password protected? Can the BIOS password be pre-entered in SmartDeploy? Sincerely, Dad.
My dad would not ask that question. This is kind of a funny one. You can't get around the password. So if you fire it off at BIOS deploy, it will prompt for a password. So you have to type it in. There's really no way around that. So your options are type it in or turn it off. Those are really the 2 options you have. I wish there was an option to include a password, but until that day, those are your options.
Okay, next question. How does it handle user profiles for OS refreshes? Jason S.
So SmartDeploy has an ability to integrate with the USMT. There's actually 2 ways of doing this. You can do it through the console, which is hardware independent. So you could say, hey, we're going to do a scan state of Austin's machine, and we're going to either save it on a file server, save it to the cloud, and then push it to say Kelly's machine. That's something you can do through the console. Or if you're doing an in-place upgrade, it'll do the scan state and load state within a given machine. It's using essentially USMT on its defaults, pretty much what it's doing. So it does the scan state, saves the MIG files, puts the new image drivers, everything on there, writes the data back to it, and then at the end of the process, it runs the load state. So it's pretty slick. Does a pretty good job of that.
All right, a couple more have snuck in here. Austin, can you install Windows updates to computers outside the company network? Daniel C.
Yeah, the patch management feature does work pretty much anywhere. It just hooks into the client and it's pushing that actual just install string. Again, I'm not sure what it actually is under the hood, but it's essentially just running a command line of hey, install every update that's available to it. So that's what the patch management piece is. From time to time, I've had customers ask, can I install specific updates? We haven't talked about this too much, but the application deployment feature can run basically anything you can script. So if you want to push a particular KB and you want to just do one, my example is if you have like some security update that's imminent, needs to be done now, you can do that. It's not really something that people use SmartDeploy with commonly because you need to make a specific app pack for every update, which is not viable. But if you need to do a specific one, then yes, and any of that can be done local or remote.
All right, now our final question of the day. Does SmartDeploy support running PowerShell commands on clients? Sincerely, the IT department.
It does. So we can run batch files, command files, VB scripts, PowerShell scripts, MSIs, whatever it is. You can run pretty much everything. A couple things about this. The actual app packs run everything through a local system context. So it's kind of similar to the sysinternal/s, I believe is what it is. So, if you want to test something out, you can run it that way. So as long as it's silent and as long as it's not going to, not going to prompt, as long as you can do it via command line, you should be able to do it. PowerShell itself is kind of funny. It requires all those little switches, the -no profile, -execution policy, all those. It's like a whole little thing. There's an article on our website on how to do that. But yes, PowerShell is absolutely supported.
All right. Well done, Austin. That's it for the questions.
All right. Well, I enjoy webcasts where I can sit here and drink and learn with everyone else.
Oh, me too.
This was fantastic.
100%.
I don't know how Austin feels about it, but I had a wonderful time.
As soon as I got the time zone figured out, I was doing well. So.
I just made you scramble a little bit. That's all.
Like, oh yeah, it's right now. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, but yeah, no. Glad you had fun.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully this gives everyone an idea of everything SmartDeploy can do remotely for imaging, for updating drivers, for all that. And I didn't know it could run PowerShell. That makes me very excited. Mm-hmm. The execution policy as mentioned would have to be bypassed, would be my guess, if it's going to work.
And no profiles in your local system.
Yep.
Yeah, the string's about that long. It's all these little things. I don't have it all memorized, but yes.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. For PDQ.com, I'm Jordan.
I'm Josh.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. I would like to congratulate Steve S. and I do believe Peter L., winners of PDQ swag. Send us your info at webcast@pdq.com. If you'd like to take SmartDeploy for a test drive, there are links available in the chat right now. We'll also have them in the show description after the fact. And if you like what you saw, hey, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Why not? Gives you something to do on the weekend. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you back here next time.